Hey everybody, welcome to Unit 1, Assignment 7, First People, First Farmers. Tonight's assignment is reading pages 35 through 39 and answering questions 38 through 44. No gift tonight. Definitions I'd like you to look for. First is displacement, which means to move from an origin position. It looks like this lady is going to be moving that from its origin position, but turns out she's the one getting moved. Solid job. Second word is emaciated, which is thin and weak, usually from having no food. We'll take care of that, no worries. Here is a fake container of fries I think it's a stuffed toy. It looks like a dog toy. Next is inexorably, which is impossible to stop, on page 36. And you should think of the Juggernaut from the X-Men series. Can't be stopped. It's actually the same wall over and over again. Bedraggled is an untidy appearance on page 37, and sometimes when you wake up, yes, very untidy. Lastly, metallurgy, the science of metal and its purification. We should be thinking of a Terminator. They're all made out of metal, right, from the future. Got it. All right, catch you back here on page 34 for some question support. The globalization of agriculture. From the various places where it originated, agriculture spread gradually to much of the rest of the earth. Although for a long time it coexisted with gathering and hunting ways of life, broadly speaking, this extension of farming occurred in two ways. The first, known as diffusion, refers to the gradual spread of agricultural techniques and perhaps of the plants and animals themselves, but without the extensive movement of agricultural people. Neighboring groups exchanged ideas and products in a down-the-line pattern of communication. A second process involved the slow colonization or migration of agricultural peoples as growing populations pushed them outward. Often this meant the conquest, absorption, or displacement, and highlight that word displacement, of the earlier gatherers and hunters, along with the spread of the languages and cultures of the migrating farmers. In many places, both processes took place. Some combination of diffusion and migration took the original agricultural package of Southwest Asia and spread it widely into Europe, Central Asia, Egypt, and North Africa between 6500 and 4000 BCE. Languages originating in the core region accompanied this movement of people and farming practices. Thus, Indo-European languages, which originated probably in Turkey and are widely spoken out even today from India to Europe, reflect this movement of culture associated with the spread of agriculture. In a similar process, the Chinese farming system moved into Southeast Asia and elsewhere, and with it a number of related language families developed. India received agricultural influences from the Middle East, Africa, and China alike. So, how about some question support? Question number 38, where did the Indo-European languages probably originate, and how did these languages spread? Stop and think, and respond. Yeah, that's right. They originated in Turkey, and the languages probably spread just like culture, and moved along with the agricultural movement. Continuing on, page 35. Within Africa, the development of agricultural societies in the southern half of the continent is associated with the migration of people speaking one or another of some 400 Bantu languages. Beginning from what is now southern Nigeria or Cameroon around 3000 BCE, Bantu-speaking people moved east and south over the next several millennia, taking with them their agricultural, cattle-raising, and later ironworking skills, as well as their languages. The Bantus generally absorbed, killed, or drove away the indigenous Paleolithic peoples or exposed them to animal-borne diseases to which they had no immunities. A similar process brought agricultural Austronesian-speaking people who originated in southern China to the Philippine and Indonesian islands with similar consequences for their earlier inhabitants. Later, Austronesian speakers carried agriculture to uninhabited islands of the Pacific and to Madagascar, off the coast of southeastern Africa. Question Number 39, identify significant facts about the Bantu migration. Stop and think and respond. Yeah, that's right. They moved east and south. They took with them all their cultural skills, and generally they killed, drove away, or absorbed all the peoples they came across. Continuing on, page 35. The globalization of agriculture was a prolonged process, lasting 10,000 years or more after its first emergence in the Fertile Crescent, but it did not take hold everywhere. The agricultural revolution in New Guinea, for example, did not spread much beyond its core origin, or core region. And in particular, it did not pass to the nearby peoples of Australia, who remained steadfastly committed to gathering and hunting ways of life. The people of the west coast of North America, Arctic regions, and southwestern Africa also maintained their gathering and hunting economies into the modern era. A very few, such as the Hadza described at the beginning of this chapter, practice it still. Question number 40. Provide evidence that the agricultural revolution in New Guinea did not spread much beyond its core region. Stop and think and respond. Yeah, that's right. There's no evidence of it in Australia. They continued to be hunter-gatherers. Continuing on, page 35. Some of those who resisted the swelling tide of agriculture lived in areas unsuitable to farming, such as harsh desert or Arctic environments. Others lived in regions of particular natural abundance, so they felt little need for agriculture. Such societies found it easier to resist agriculture if they were not in the direct line of advancing more powerful farming people. But many of the remaining gathering and hunting peoples knew about agricultural practices from nearby neighbors, suggesting that they quite deliberately chose to resist it in favor of the freer life of the Paleolithic ancestors. Nonetheless, by the beginning of the Common Era, the global spread of agriculture had reduced gathering and hunting peoples to a small and dwindling minority of humankind. If the process meant progress in certain ways, it also claimed many victims, as the relentless expanding agricultural frontier slowly destroyed gathering and hunting societies. Whether this process occurred through the peaceful diffusion of new technologies, through intermarriage, through disease, or through the violent displacement of earlier peoples, the steady erosion of this ancient way of life has been a persistent thread of the human story over the past 10,000 years. The final chapters of that long story are being written in their own times. After the agricultural revolution, the future almost everywhere lay with the farmers and herders and with the distinctive societies they created. The culture of agriculture. What did that future look like? In what ways did societies based on the domestication of plants and animals differ from those rooted in a gathering and hunting economy? In the first place, the agricultural revolution led to an increase in human population as the greater productivity of agriculture was able to support much larger numbers. An earlier agricultural settlement uncovered near Jericho in present-day Israel probably had 2,000 people, a vast increase in the size of human communities compared to much smaller Paleolithic bands. On a global level, scholars estimate that the world's population was about 6 million around 10,000 years ago, before the agricultural revolution got underway, and shot up to some 50 million by 5,000 years ago and 250 million at the beginning of the Common Era. Here was the real beginning of human dominance over other forms of life on the planet. Question 41. Why did the agricultural revolution lead to an increase in human population? Stop and think and respond. Yeah, that's right. More productivity of agriculture meant they could support more people. It's that simple. Continuing on, page 37. That dominance was reflected in major environmental transformations. In a growing number of places, forests and grasslands became cultivated fields and grazing lands. Human selection modified the genetic composition of numerous plants and animals. In parts of the Middle East within 1,000 years after the beginning of the settled agricultural life, some villages were abandoned when soil erosion and deforestation led to declining crop yields, which could not support mounting populations. The advent of more intensive agriculture associated with the city-based civilizations only heightened this human impact on the landscape. Human life, too, changed dramatically in farming communities, and not necessarily for the better. Farming involved hard work, and more of it than in many earlier gathering and hunting societies. The remains of early agricultural people show some deterioration in health, more tooth decay, malnutrition, and anemia, a shorter physical stature, and diminished life expectancy. Living close to animals subjected humans to new diseases: smallpox, flu, measles, chickenpox, malaria, tuberculosis, rabies, while living in larger communities generated epidemics for the first time in human history. Furthermore, relying on a small number of plants and animals rendered early agricultural societies vulnerable to famine in case of crop failure, drought, or other catastrophes. The advent of agriculture bore costs as well as benefits. Question number 42. Provide evidence that farming did not necessarily mean an improved life for ordinary people. Stop and think and respond. Yeah, that's right. Get back on the other question here. People were smaller. They had more tooth decay, malnourished, and their life expectancy shrunk in agricultural societies. Continuing on, page 38. Agriculture also imposed constraints on human communities. Some Paleolithic people had settled in permanent villages, but all agricultural people did, as farming required a settled life. A good example of an early agricultural settlement comes from northern China, one of the original independent sources of agriculture, where the domestication of rice, millet, pigs, and chickens gave rise to settled communities by about 7,000 years ago. In 1953, workers digging the foundation for a factory uncovered the remains of an ancient village, now called Bampo, near the present-day city of Xi'an. Millet, pigs, and dogs had been domesticated, but diets were supplemented with wild plants, animals, and fish. Some 45 houses covered with thatch laid over wooden beams provided homes to perhaps 500 people. More than 200 storage pits permitted the accumulation of grain, and 6 kilns and pottery wheels enabled the production of various pots and vases and dishes, many decorated with geometric designs and human and animal images. A large central space suggests an area for public religious or political activity, and a trench surrounding the village indicates some common effort to defend the community. Early agricultural villages such as Bampo reveal another feature of the age of agriculture, an explosion of technological innovation. Mobile Paleolithic peoples had little use for pots, but such vessels were essential for settled societies, and their creation and elaboration accompanied agriculture everywhere. So too did the weaving of textiles made possible by collecting the fibers of domesticated plants, cotton and flax, for example, and raising animals such as sheep. Evidence for the invention of looms of several kinds date back to 7,000 years ago, and textiles, some elaborately decorated, show up in Peru, Switzerland, China, and Egypt. Like agriculture itself, weaving has a technology in which women were probably the primary innovators. It was a task that was compatible with child-rearing responsibilities, which virtually all human societies assign primarily to women. Another technology associated with the agricultural revolution was metallurgy, and highlight that word, metallurgy. The working of gold, copper, then bronze, and later iron became part of the jewelry, tool, and weapon skill set of humankind. The long Stone Age of human technological history was coming to an end, and the age of metals was beginning. Question 43, what is metallurgy? Well, the definition's already in the PowerPoint. So, question 44, what was the secondary products revolution? I would just ask you to go check Quizlet. You've already done this before. So, that's everything, kiddos. One more assignment left in this unit. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.